Friends, if you want to watch one of the biggest super hit movies in history, Titanic, 1997, then you must like this video. And if you're visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe because today we are diving into a film that broke records, won hearts, and still makes audiences emotional even after decades. Yes, friends, today's video is all about James Cameron's legendary film Titanic. We're going to talk about what this movie is really about, why it became a global phenomenon, and where you can still watch it today. I'll be sharing all the exciting details, from its epic story and unforgettable characters to behind-the-scenes facts about the technical department, music, pre-production, filming, post-production, and of course, the massive budget and record-breaking box office collection. Not just that, we'll also talk about the star cast, the powerful performances by Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, and how their characters Jack and Rose became iconic in cinema history. I'll also give you a short review of the story, along with some fascinating facts you might not know about this movie. So friends, watch this video till the very end, because this journey into Titanic is going to be just as epic as the film itself. Now let's set sail and begin the video. Titanic begins not in 1912, but in the present day, with a modern expedition searching for treasure in the wreckage of the sunken ship. This framing device immediately sets a reflective tone, as we are introduced to the elderly Rose, whose memories serve as the gateway into the central narrative. The story then shifts seamlessly into the past, transporting us onto the grand ship at the moment of its maiden voyage. This dual timeline structure creates a sense of inevitability. Viewers know the tragic end is coming, but the emotional weight builds as we follow the intimate story unfolding within it. At its heart, the film follows Jack Dawson, a spirited third-class passenger, and Rose DeWitt Bukater, a young woman trapped by social expectations and an arranged engagement. Their meeting is the first major turning point, sparked when Jack intervenes as Rose contemplates a desperate escape from her constrained life. This moment is not just about saving her physically, but symbolically ignites the tension between freedom and confinement, passion and duty, love and obligation. From here, the film evolves into a sweeping romance set against the grandeur of the Titanic, where the ship itself becomes both a stage and a character, embodying human ambition, luxury, and impending doom. The narrative alternates between moments of intimate vulnerability and grand spectacle. Jack and Rose's secret encounters, from sketching scenes to stolen dances in steerage, contrast sharply with the cold control of Cal and Rose's mother, who represent the rigid power structures of wealth and class. This opposition becomes one of the film's central conflicts, love battling against societal boundaries. The middle of the story leans heavily into this dynamic, giving audiences both a personal romance and a critique of class divisions. The second half of the film shifts drastically when the iceberg is struck. The tonal change is immediate. What began as a romantic drama transforms into a survival epic. Every relationship, every conflict introduced earlier, is tested under the weight of chaos and fear. The ship's slow descent provides both a literal and metaphorical unraveling, the grandeur of human creation collapsing in the face of nature's indifference. The turning point here is not just the collision itself, but how it exposes the fragility of human arrogance and the cost of social inequality. Lifeboats are limited, the wealthy are prioritized, and the poor are locked below deck. The intimate love story that has carried the film forward now collides with historical reality, heightening the stakes and the emotional resonance. As the Titanic sinks, the structure of the story mirrors the descent into tragedy. The pace quickens, scenes become more fragmented, and perspective jumps between multiple groups of passengers, highlighting not only Jack and Rose's struggle but also the collective human response to catastrophe. The shift in perspective expands the scale, reminding us that while the romance is central, it is only one thread in a vast human tapestry of loss. Thematically, the narrative culminates in sacrifice and memory. Jack and Rose's love story, though fleeting in time, transcends the tragedy because it represents choice, freedom, and the courage to live authentically. The present-day framing returns to reinforce this idea. The tale is not just about the sinking of a ship, but about what remains in memory and meaning. Rose's recollection transforms the Titanic from a wreckage of steel into a vessel of human experience, reminding audiences that history is not only about events, but about the emotions and lives carried within them. The characters in Titanic are well developed and undergo significant transformation, which is central to the film's emotional impact. Their motivations, relationships, and individual arcs are the core of the narrative, shaping the story from a simple historical disaster into a poignant epic. Character arcs and transformation. Rose DeWitt Bukater begins as a privileged yet suffocated young woman, a princess in a glass tower, as she describes herself. Her life is meticulously planned by her mother and fiancé, and she feels trapped by the expectations of her social class. Her transformation is a journey from compliance to self-realization. She initially sees suicide as her only escape, but her encounter with Jack shows her a different kind of freedom. She learns to break free from societal constraints, not just by pursuing a forbidden romance, but by embracing a life lived on her own terms. Her arc culminates in her survival, not just physically, but as a new person who has shed her old identity and carries Jack's spirit of independence with her. Jack Dawson is seemingly a static character, a king of the world from the start. However, his arc is less about internal change and more about his impact on others. He is the catalyst for Rose's transformation. Jack is a free-spirited artist, confident and comfortable in his own skin, living from moment to moment. His motivation is a simple, joyous one, to experience life to the fullest. Through his relationship with Rose, his arc becomes a testament to the power of love and sacrifice. His arc is completed not by his survival, but by his final, heroic act of giving his life for Rose's, proving that his love was more than just a fleeting romance. He leaves behind a profound legacy, fundamentally altering Rose's life and her perception of the world. The role of their relationship. The relationship between Jack and Rose is the engine of the film. It is a rebellion against the rigid social structure of the Gilded Age, represented by the ship itself, a microcosm of society with its strict class divisions. Their love story is not just a romance, it is a clash of worlds. Jack represents freedom, authenticity, and the working class, while Rose embodies the stifling conventions and wealth of the aristocracy. The intense, condensed nature of their relationship, unfolding over just a few days, makes their bond feel both epic and desperate. The love they find in each other gives them the courage to face the ultimate tragedy, and it is their bond that provides the emotional weight to the historical disaster. The antagonist and supporting characters. Cal Hockley is not just a jealous fiancé. He is the embodiment of the oppressive social structure from which Rose is trying to escape. His character provides a stark contrast to Jack, highlighting Jack's genuine nature and Rose's plight. Cal's motivation is possessiveness and control, not love. His descent into a desperate, vindictive figure during the sinking further solidifies his role as the apathetic and cruel face of the aristocracy. The supporting characters, like Rose's mother Ruth and the unsinkable Molly Brown, further enrich the story. Ruth represents the old world order, desperate to maintain her family's social standing at any cost. Molly Brown, a new money socialite, serves as a bridge between Jack and Rose's worlds and offers a more compassionate view of wealth. These characters add depth and context, reinforcing the central theme of class struggle and the personal choices that define a person's character. Ultimately, the character arcs and their interwoven relationships are what elevate Titanic beyond a simple disaster film. The film is not just about the sinking of a ship. It is about the sinking of old identities and the birth of new ones, forged in the crucible of love and survival. In Titanic, character development is not just a narrative device. It's the emotional engine that drives the entire story. The film's central figures, Jack Dawson and Rose DeWitt Bukater, are crafted with a depth that transcends their archetypes, evolving in ways that mirror the themes of liberation, love, and tragedy. Rose begins the film as a young woman suffocating under the weight of societal expectations and a loveless engagement. Her world is defined by rigid class structures and emotional repression. But through her relationship with Jack, she awakens to the possibility of a life shaped by passion, autonomy, and authenticity. Jack doesn't just represent romantic love. He symbolizes freedom. His spontaneity, artistic soul, and disregard for class boundaries challenge Rose to confront her own desires and fears. Their bond is transformative. Rose sheds the persona imposed on her by her family and fiancé, and begins to reclaim her identity. By the end of the film, her survival is not just physical but spiritual. She chooses to live a life that honors the emotional truth Jack helped her discover. Jack, while seemingly more static, serves as a catalyst for change. His motivations are clear and consistent. He seeks beauty, experience, and connection. Yet his arc is meaningful in its own right. He enters the Titanic as a drifter, someone who lives moment to moment, but through Rose, he finds a purpose greater than himself. His love for her is selfless and profound, culminating in his ultimate sacrifice. Jack's death is not just a plot point, it's the crucible through which Rose's transformation is completed. The supporting characters also contribute to the thematic richness. Cal Hockley, Rose's fiancé, is more than a villain. He embodies the oppressive forces of wealth, control, and entitlement. His interactions with Rose and Jack highlight the stakes of defiance in a stratified society. Ruth, Rose's mother, is a tragic figure clinging to status for survival, illustrating how fear can masquerade as duty. Even minor characters like Molly Brown and Captain Smith reflect different facets of courage, denial, and dignity in the face of disaster. The relationships in Titanic are layered and dynamic. Jack and Rose's romance is tender and electric, but it's also a rebellion against the world around them. Their connection is forged not just in stolen glances and whispered promises, but in moments of crisis and clarity. The arc of their love, from chance encounter to irrevocable bond, mirrors the ship's own journey from grandeur to ruin. And in that parallel, the film finds its emotional core. Ultimately, Titanic is a story about transformation. It's about how love can liberate, how tragedy can clarify, and how memory can preserve what time and water try to erase. The characters are not merely passengers on a doomed ship. They are vessels of hope, defiance, and enduring humanity. The performances in Titanic are not merely competent. They are immersive, emotionally resonant, and deeply attuned to the film's sweeping tone and tragic mood. The actors do more than portray characters. They inhabit them with a sincerity and vulnerability that elevate the story from historical spectacle to intimate human drama. Leonardo DiCaprio's portrayal of Jack Dawson is magnetic. He infuses Jack with a blend of charm, spontaneity, and quiet intensity that makes the character instantly compelling. DiCaprio's physicality, his relaxed posture, expressive eyes, and unguarded smile, conveys Jack's free-spirited nature, while his emotional range allows for moments of profound tenderness and urgency. In scenes where Jack comforts Rose, challenges authority, or faces death, DiCaprio never overplays the emotion. He maintains a grounded authenticity that makes Jack's courage and love feel real, not idealized. His chemistry with Kate Winslet is palpable, and it's in their shared glances, whispered exchanges, and moments of silence that the depth of their connection is most powerfully felt. Kate Winslet delivers a performance that is both restrained and explosive. As Rose, she navigates a complex emotional landscape: fear, longing, rebellion, grief, with remarkable nuance. Winslet's command of subtle expression is evident in the early scenes, where Rose's internal struggle is conveyed through fleeting looks and controlled gestures. As the story progresses, she allows Rose's transformation to unfold organically. Her voice gains strength, her movements become freer, and her gaze shifts from resignation to resolve. Winslet's ability to balance vulnerability with defiance gives Rose a layered humanity that anchors the film's emotional arc. In the final scenes, her portrayal of loss and remembrance is haunting, not because it is dramatic, but because it is deeply felt. Billy Zane, as Cal Hockley, brings a chilling precision to the role of Rose's fiancé. He avoids caricature, instead presenting Cal as a man whose entitlement and insecurity manifest in increasingly cruel behavior. Zane's performance is marked by a simmering intensity. His clipped speech, rigid posture, and sudden bursts of rage reveal a character unraveling under the threat of losing control. His scenes with Winslet are charged with tension, and his portrayal adds a necessary darkness to the film's emotional palette. Gloria Stewart, playing the older Rose, offers a quiet, dignified performance that frames the entire narrative. Her voice carries the weight of memory, and her eyes reflect a lifetime of love and loss. Stewart's presence lends the film a sense of continuity and emotional resonance, reminding the audience that the story is not just about what happened, but about what was felt and remembered. The supporting cast enriches the world of the Titanic with texture and authenticity. Frances Fisher, as Ruth DeWitt Bukater, embodies the desperation of a woman clinging to status, her stern demeanor masking a deep fear of poverty. Kathy Bates, as Molly Brown, brings warmth and resilience, offering a counterpoint to the rigid social hierarchy. David Warner, Jonathan Hyde, and Bernard Hill each contribute performances that reflect the varied responses to crisis, denial, duty, and quiet heroism. Together, the ensemble creates a tapestry of human experience. Their interactions, reactions, and emotional truths make the Titanic not just a setting, but a living world. The actors do not merely support the leads, they amplify the film's themes of love, loss, and transformation, grounding its grandeur in the intimate details of human behavior. The performances in Titanic are central to the film's success, with the actors successfully bringing their characters to life and elevating the story's emotional depth. The chemistry between the leads and the strength of the supporting cast transform a grand-scale disaster film into a deeply personal and believable human drama. The leads. Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson delivers a performance that is both charismatic and sincere. He embodies Jack's free-spirited nature with a natural ease, making the audience believe his spontaneity and charm. DiCaprio's portrayal is not merely that of a handsome romantic lead. He injects Jack with a genuine goodness and vulnerability that makes his character's love for Rose feel earned and his ultimate sacrifice heartbreakingly real. His performance grounds the epic romance, making Jack a relatable and aspirational figure who lives life on his own terms. Kate Winslet as Rose DeWitt Bukater provides a masterful performance of a young woman trapped by her circumstances. Winslet's portrayal beautifully captures Rose's internal conflict. The sophisticated poise demanded by her class is constantly at war with her desire for freedom and authentic connection. She convincingly navigates Rose's arc from a melancholic debutante to a woman of fierce independence. Winslet's ability to convey a wide range of emotions, from quiet despair to passionate defiance, makes Rose's transformation the emotional core of the film. The chemistry between Winslet and DiCaprio is palpable, making their forbidden romance feel both urgent and timeless. Standout supporting performances. The supporting cast significantly enhances the film's believability and emotional resonance. Billy Zane's performance as Caledon Cal Hockley is a standout, as he expertly portrays a character who is not just a one-dimensional villain but a complex symbol of aristocratic possessiveness and cruelty. Zane makes Cal's arrogance and entitled sense of ownership genuinely chilling, providing a formidable counterpoint to Jack's sincerity and making Rose's escape from him all the more urgent. Frances Fisher as Ruth DeWitt Bukater, Rose's mother, embodies the suffocating social pressures of the era. Her performance is nuanced, revealing a woman who is not purely malicious, but rather a product of a system she is desperate to uphold. Fisher's portrayal highlights the high stakes of Rose's rebellion, as her mother's motivations are driven by a fear of social ruin. Kathy Bates brings warmth and wit to the historical figure of Molly Brown. Her performance as the new money woman who defies social norms provides a compassionate and human element to the otherwise rigid class structure of the ship. Bates's Molly acts as a surrogate for the audience's own moral compass, showing kindness to Jack and challenging the snobbery of characters like Ruth and Cal. Her memorable lines and strong presence create a character who is both a source of levity and a symbol of human decency. The collective efforts of the cast ensure that the film is not just a spectacle of special effects and disaster, but a character-driven story. Each performance, from the leads to the smallest roles, contributes to the emotional fabric of the film, making the tragic events of the sinking hit on a deeply personal level. The actors' commitment to their roles makes the audience care for their fates, turning the historical tragedy into a powerful narrative about love, sacrifice, and survival. The performances in Titanic carry the film's romance and tragedy with an immediacy that makes the history feel lived in. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Jack Dawson with a buoyant physicality and an open, unguarded face that sells both the character's optimism and his scrappy resourcefulness. He moves through first-class salons and third-class dance floors with the same fluid confidence, and that ease becomes the engine of the love story. DiCaprio's line delivery often lands as quick, lightly tossed-off remarks that hide sincerity underneath, so when the character is pressed by danger or duty, the sudden stillness in his voice has weight. There is a distinct emotional arc in his body language alone. Early on he leans into rooms as if everything is within reach. As the crisis unfolds, his posture narrows, protective and intent, turning his energy toward keeping Rose alive. The famous deck scenes work not because of spectacle, but because his performance makes exhilaration credible in a place already haunted by our foreknowledge of disaster. Kate Winslet gives Rose a layered progression from constraint to self-possession. Her speech has a measured, upper-class cadence at first, and the careful control in her eyes suggests a character constantly monitoring herself. Small ruptures in that composure signal the character's inner life before the script makes it explicit. When she laughs freely in steerage, Winslet doesn't play rebellion as noise. She loosens the rhythm and lets warmth seep in, so freedom feels like a discovery rather than a tantrum. In the most intimate scenes, her stillness is the point. She lets silence do work and meets DiCaprio's playfulness with a grounded curiosity, building chemistry that plays as two people recognizing the same hunger for something larger than their assigned roles. In moments of crisis, Winslet pivots to a focused resolve that changes the temperature of every scene she enters, giving the final stretch its beating heart. Together, the leads create a dynamic that feels spontaneous yet precise. Their chemistry is choreographed without looking choreographed. Shared glances track meaning across rooms. The way they occupy space on the prow or cling to railings in the final act functions as emotional writing in motion. This coordination allows the film to shift tonal gears from courtship to catastrophe without losing momentum. The romance does not evaporate when the ship is in peril. It condenses, and that is a credit to two performances that never lose sight of character even when surrounded by noise, water, and fire. Billy Zane's Cal is all polished surface and controlled menace. He doesn't play the antagonist as a cartoon, but as a man who believes that possession and protection are the same thing. The clipped diction, the immaculate posture, the tight smile that never reaches the eyes, all communicate entitlement as an inherited muscle memory. When fear strips the character of decorum, Zane lets panic turn to cruelty with a chilling logic. The performance clarifies the film's class critique by giving it a human face that is handsome and persuasive until it isn't, making every confrontation with Rose about power as much as love. Frances Fisher as Ruth sharpens that class pressure further. She wears social anxiety like armor, and her most cutting lines are delivered with a brittle grace that signals a woman terrified of falling. The corset scene is a performance of control turned desperate. Fisher lets the character's fear of poverty and shame leak through the cracks, transforming Ruth from mere obstacle into a tragic functionary of a system that devours its own. Her presence keeps the film's romantic sweep tethered to the economic realities driving Rose's choices. Kathy Bates brings a gust of human generosity as Molly Brown. She plays confidence without arrogance, using plain-spokenness as a social equalizer. Bates makes every room warmer and more democratic, and in doing so she embodies a different vision of wealth, one that recognizes worth beyond lineage. The lifeboat material gains moral clarity because Bates grounds it in a tough, pragmatic kindness. Her reactions to etiquette and injustice alike give the audience a compass. Gloria Stewart frames the entire film with a performance of memory. As the older Rose, she does not simply narrate events. She relives them in the voice and eyes of someone who has curated a lifetime from a handful of essential choices. Stewart's timing, her gentle humor, and the sudden catch in her breath invite the audience to inhabit remembrance rather than observe it. That storytelling presence transforms the disaster from spectacle into inheritance, a history delivered from one person to another. Bill Paxton, as the modern treasure hunter, plays the skeptic who becomes a witness. His arc is understated but necessary. He starts as a man chasing artifacts and ends as someone newly attentive to the human lives behind them, and Paxton's quiet recalibration helps the film bridge eras without losing tone. Bernard Hill's Captain Smith embodies beleaguered dignity. He plays command as a burden carried in the shoulders, allowing a few brief, conflicted glances to say what protocol cannot. Victor Garber's Thomas Andrews is a study in decency under impossible pressure. His soft-spoken regret and practical intelligence make him the film's moral engineer, and the scenes in which he silently measures consequences are among the most affecting. Jonathan Hyde's Bruce Ismay balances ambition and self-justification, letting pride curdle into rationalizations that feel painfully human rather than villainous caricature. David Warner's Lovejoy gives the story a focused physical threat, and the performance's narrow-eyed precision injects danger into private corridors and grand staircases alike. Around them, an ensemble of character actors and extras sustain the illusion of a floating city. The ship's crew, from officers trying to keep order to musicians playing through the night, perform with an economy that honors the moment. Ioan Griffith's Fifth Officer Lowe, glimpsed briefly but decisively, carries the weight of action taken too late, and that brevity makes the choice echo. Even small roles land because the actors understand the film's tonal balance. They don't compete with the leads, they surround them with lived detail, so that each cutaway to a family, a crewman, a mother with children, deepens the emotional field. The ensemble's dialect work and physical performances are crucial. The elegance of upper-deck posture, the cramped bustle of steerage bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, the way fear changes breath and movement as the ship lists, all of it is performance. Cold breath, shaking hands on brass rails, the unsteady gait on tilting floors, these choices make the catastrophe tactile. The actors trust stillness when stillness hurts, and let panic bloom in unglamorous shapes when panic is honest. That commitment to physical truth allows the special effects to feel like consequences rather than showcases. Music and performance meet in moments where faces carry motifs. The score swells, but it is Winslet's fixed stare across a crowded room, DiCaprio's reassuring nod, Bates's clipped command, Hill's resigned gaze into a wheelhouse window that turns sound into feeling. Dialogue often yields to looks, and the cast consistently makes those looks readable without becoming theatrical. In a film famous for spectacle, what lingers are human scales of grief, courage, pettiness, and grace, articulated by actors who treat every beat as a choice that reveals character. What emerges is a fabric of performances that elevate one another. Leads ignite the emotional core, principal antagonists sharpen the stakes, and supporting players seed the world with specificities that make every corridor and deck feel inhabited. The believability of the romance, the credibility of the class conflict, and the visceral pull of the disaster depend on that collective work. Because the actors play truth rather than tropes, the film's most familiar images feel personal, as if we are watching not the retelling of a legend, but the remembering of lives. James Cameron shapes the tone and mood of Titanic through a deliberate blend of epic scope and intimate storytelling, creating a film that is both a historical spectacle and a deeply personal drama. His stylistic choices, from the pacing to the shot composition, are meticulously crafted to enhance the emotional experience. Pacing and narrative structure. The film's tone is set by its unique narrative structure. By framing the story with the present-day discovery of the wreck, Cameron immediately establishes a mood of tragic grandeur and nostalgic reflection. The use of Old Rose as a narrator imbues the past events with a sense of inevitability and poignancy. This structural choice allows the audience to experience the romance and joy on the ship with a constant, haunting knowledge of its fate. The first half of the film is paced like a classic romance, building the characters and their relationships slowly, allowing the audience to become invested in Jack and Rose's world. This deliberate, unhurried pace makes the sudden shift to the disaster feel all the more shocking and impactful. The second half of the film is a masterclass in cinematic suspense, with the pacing accelerating dramatically as the ship begins to sink, mirroring the growing panic and chaos on board. Shot composition and visual storytelling. Cameron's use of shot composition is key to his storytelling. He employs a vast array of shots to convey both the scale of the ship and the intimacy of the characters' relationships. Wide, sweeping shots of the Titanic at sea emphasize its immense size and the feeling of isolation in the vast ocean. These shots underscore the hubris of its design and the fragility of human ambition. In contrast, close-ups are used to focus on the emotional core of the film. The camera lingers on the faces of Jack and Rose, capturing the subtle emotions of their burgeoning love and the terror in their eyes during the sinking. The famous shot of Jack and Rose at the bow of the ship is a perfect example of this. The wide shot captures their iconic pose, but the camera pushes in to focus on their faces, blending the epic romance with a personal moment of freedom. Cameron also uses verticality to highlight class divisions. The shots of the grand staircases and the vast distances between the different decks physically represent the social chasm between first and third class. This visual language reinforces the film's central themes without needing heavy-handed dialogue. The camera literally travels from the opulent upper decks down to the crowded steerage, visually charting the path of Jack and Rose's forbidden romance. Narrative vision and stylistic choices. Cameron's vision is to make the audience feel as if they are passengers on the Titanic, experiencing both its splendor and its terror. He achieves this through a meticulous attention to detail and a commitment to authenticity. The sets are not just backdrops. They are carefully crafted environments that immerse the audience in the world of 1912. The use of real-life events and characters, such as the musicians playing to the end and the brave actions of Captain Smith, adds a layer of historical weight to the fiction. The stylistic choice to use CGI and practical effects in a seamless blend was groundbreaking for its time. The sinking sequence is a triumph of visual effects, but its impact is rooted in the believable terror of the characters. The audience watches the ship break apart not as a special effect, but as a direct threat to the lives of the people they have come to care about. The sound design is also crucial, with the chilling groans of the ship's hull and the frantic cries of the passengers adding to the overwhelming sense of dread. Through these choices, Cameron transforms a historical event into a deeply personal and unforgettable human tragedy. James Cameron's direction in Titanic is a masterclass in tonal orchestration and narrative immersion. He constructs the film with a dual sensibility, epic in scale, yet intimate in emotion, allowing the grandeur of the historical event to coexist with the delicate unfolding of a personal love story. The tone is carefully modulated throughout, shifting from romantic idealism to mounting dread, and finally to elegiac reflection. This tonal progression is not abrupt but fluid, guided by Cameron's meticulous control over pacing, visual rhythm, and emotional beats. The film's mood is established early through visual and auditory cues. The opening scenes, set in the present day, are subdued and contemplative, with muted colors and a haunting score that evoke the weight of memory. As the narrative transitions to 1912, the mood brightens with the opulence of the Titanic's launch. Cameron uses warm lighting, sweeping camera movements, and rich production design to evoke a sense of wonder and possibility. This initial mood is essential. It mirrors Rose's awakening and sets the stage for the emotional stakes to come. Stylistically, Cameron employs a blend of classical and modern techniques. His shot composition is often symmetrical and deliberate, especially in scenes aboard the ship's upper decks, reinforcing the rigid social order. In contrast, scenes in the lower decks and open spaces are shot with more kinetic energy, reflecting Jack's freedom and vitality. The use of close-ups is particularly effective in conveying intimacy. Cameron frequently isolates Jack and Rose in the frame, even amid crowds, emphasizing the singularity of their connection. These choices are not merely aesthetic, they serve the emotional architecture of the film. The pacing is calibrated to mirror the narrative arc. The first half unfolds with a leisurely grace, allowing the romance to develop organically. Cameron resists the urge to rush, instead letting moments breathe, a glance across a dining room, a sketching session, a dance below deck. This deliberate pacing deepens the emotional investment. When the iceberg strikes, the tempo accelerates dramatically. The editing becomes sharper, the camera more restless, and the score more urgent. This shift is not jarring but inevitable, mirroring the intrusion of chaos into a world that once felt safe. Cameron's narrative vision is anchored in contrast. He juxtaposes the beauty of the ship with the horror of its demise, the innocence of first love with the brutality of loss. These contrasts are heightened by his use of visual motifs, the grand staircase, the locked gates, the rising water, all of which recur with symbolic weight. The staircase, for instance, is first seen as a place of elegance and social ritual, but later becomes a site of desperation and death. Such transformations deepen the thematic resonance. Sound design and music also play a crucial role. Cameron collaborates with composer James Horner to weave a score that is both lyrical and mournful. The music underscores emotional transitions, often swelling in moments of connection and receding in moments of despair. The ambient sounds of the ship, the creaking hull, the distant engines, the panicked voices, are layered to create a sense of immersion. These auditory elements are not background, they are integral to the mood. Cameron's direction is also notable for its emotional sincerity. He does not shy away from sentimentality, but he earns it through character development and narrative structure. The film's emotional peaks, the I'm flying scene, the final farewell in the freezing water, the closing montage, are crafted with a clarity of feeling that resonates deeply. Cameron trusts the audience to engage with these moments not as clichés, but as expressions of genuine human experience. The integration of historical detail with fictional narrative is seamless. Cameron's attention to authenticity, the ship's architecture, the period costumes, the class dynamics, grounds the story in reality, even as the romance elevates it to myth. This balance between fact and feeling is central to the film's impact. It allows the audience to experience the Titanic not just as a historical tragedy, but as a vessel of dreams, choices, and irreversible consequences. Every directorial choice, from camera placement to narrative structure, serves the film's emotional and thematic goals. Cameron does not merely tell a story. He constructs an experience, one that envelopes the viewer in a world of beauty, danger, and enduring love. James Cameron shapes the film's tone through a framing device that turns disaster into remembrance. Opening on the wreck in the present day, he establishes an elegiac mood before a single wave in 1912 has broken. The transition from corroded steel to gleaming decks is not just a visual flourish. It announces that the story we are about to see is being curated by memory. Voiceover and match dissolves guide the shift, so the temporal leap feels like a breath drawn across time rather than a hard cut. This choice invites the audience to watch every moment with double vision, seeing both the living ship and its ghost. The narrative vision balances intimacy with scale. Cameron places the love story in the foreground, but continually folds it into the ship's broader social organism. Early scenes breathe. Conversations on the promenade, quiet glances at dinner, the looseness of a late-night dance. The pacing here is deliberate, with longer takes and graceful dolly moves that let courtship bloom. Spatial orientation is emphasized. Repeated routes along corridors, through the grand staircase, and out onto the foredeck teach the audience the ship's geography. This careful mapping becomes the foundation for suspense later when the same spaces tilt, flood, and constrict. Shot composition encodes class and character. First-class interiors are presented with symmetrical frames, polished surfaces, and controlled camera movement, reinforcing ritual and hierarchy. In steerage, the lens sits closer to faces, bodies crowd the edges, and the camera roams more freely. Energy and improvisation register as texture. Cameron uses eye line and height to underline power. Cal and Ruth are often shot from slightly below, their authority inflated by angle and distance, while Jack is filmed at eye level in spaces humming with other lives. The grand staircase functions as a moral stage, lit like a jewel box, where control is performed in public and contested in private. When the iceberg arrives, pacing turns from expansive to metronomic. The collision itself is staged with restraint. No bombast, only scraping steel, shearing ice, and the quiet horror of inevitability. Music recedes and the soundscape contracts to creaks, rivets, and the thin voices of telegraph and whistles. From that point forward, the edit accelerates in calibrated pulses. Cross-cutting tracks the ship's slow death from multiple vantage points. The bridge where protocol falters, the engine room where labor becomes sacrifice, the wireless room where SOS taps into the dark, the lower decks where gates become weapons. Each cut returns the audience to a clear map of cause and effect, so chaos reads as consequence, not confusion. Cameron's hallmark is the fusion of physical realism with classical melodrama. Water is photographed as a character, a creeping line under a door, a sudden fist through glass, a relentless wall that erases architecture and status alike. Practical effects and in-camera stunts give the liquid its weight. Bodies stumble with real gravity on canted sets, and extras fight current and temperature in shots held long enough for effort to register. The camera stays at human scale even when the spectacle widens. A majestic wide of the stern lifting is immediately punctured by a close shot of hands losing grip. The alternation sustains terror while preserving empathy. Lighting and color manage the film's emotional temperature. The first half glows with ambers and creams, candlelight flickers on wood and brass, and daylight on the bow feels like oxygen. After impact, the palette cools to slate, green, and hard white. Flares cut the night with brief, brutal illumination. The transition is not abrupt. It seeps. Even before the iceberg, hints of blue creep into warm frames as class pressures tighten around Rose. By the time our characters are waist-deep, the warm world is visible only in memory, held in the faces and in the music. Music and silence are deployed with narrative intent. James Horner's themes enter softly and recede when physical stakes demand uncluttered sound. Diegetic music anchors reality. A string quartet playing on deck dignifies panic without romanticizing it. At key beats Cameron trusts quiet. The breath before the ship breaks is almost empty of score, an auditory void that lets the image imprint. In smaller scenes, the rhythm of speech and the scrape of shoes on wet would do the emotional work a cue might otherwise carry. Blocking and movement translate theme into action. In spaces of privilege, Characters are arranged in neat planes with clear lines of sight. In spaces of survival, bodies coil around obstacles, turn sideways through doors, and fight for verticality as decks become walls. Gates are not only props but arguments made metal, their locks staging the moral question in plain view. Cameron often frames lovers through barriers, grilles, railings, portholes, so that the moment a barrier breaks carries dramatic charge beyond logistics. The film's most famous images serve structure rather than decoration. The flight at the bow establishes a shared point of view. Later, that very position becomes impossible, claimed by the sea. The fog of breath transforms romance into mortality cue, a visual reminder that every promise is made in air that can be lost. The recurring image of clocks suggests a ship built to measure time meeting a force that dissolves it. Cameron returns to the wreck's lantern-lit chambers to let memory reassert authorship, then dives back into the past with a matched dissolve that restores color and life. That oscillation is the film's tonal spine. Editing constructs momentum without sacrificing clarity. The journey from call to launch to lowering lifeboats is a chain of meticulously staged beats. Orders travel by voice, whistle, and gesture. The audience watches command degrade as conditions worsen. Cameron and his editors keep orientation intact with repeated anchor points. The boat deck's edge, the base of the first funnel, the compass platform above the bridge. As the stern rises, cuts shorten and angles grow steeper, not to disorient but to validate the new geometry of fear. When the ship finally fractures, the break is readable because every previous shot taught the eye how the vessel was built. Perspective management is a subtle but critical directorial choice. The story is largely roses, yet the camera roams to others with empathy. A mother tucking in children, a stoker fighting steam, an officer torn between duty and terror. These brief portraits are staged with the same seriousness as the lead scenes. The effect is cumulative. The audience does not track a single survival, but a communal test, which deepens the pathos without diffusing focus. The modern-day Strand returns at carefully chosen intervals to calibrate mood, not to interrupt. A recovered sketch or a pocket watch surfaces like a thought arriving unbidden, and the narrative slips back into 1912 as if the past had only stepped out of the room. Finally, Cameron's attention to mechanical detail builds trust. Telegraph handles, valve wheels, block and tackle, davits creaking under weight. These touches are given screen time because the director treats the ship as a living system. When that system fails, the audience has already been taught to read its symptoms. The film's impact grows from this grammar of the concrete. Emotion follows function, and spectacle is earned by the credibility of parts working, then breaking, exactly as shown. Cinematographer Russell Carpenter's work in Titanic is integral to the film's storytelling, using camera angles, lighting, and framing to create a powerful atmosphere, build tension, and establish the emotional tone of key scenes. The visual language of the film is as crucial as its dialogue, telling a story of love, class, and tragedy through carefully composed images. Camera angles. The film's camera angles are strategically employed to manipulate the audience's perspective and emotional connection to the characters and events. High-angle shots are often used to emphasize the grandeur and scale of the ship, as well as to make characters appear small and insignificant against its massive structure. This is particularly effective in scenes showing the sheer size of the ship, like when Jack first looks up at the bow from the pier. The high-angle shots of passengers scrambling for lifeboats later in the film convey a sense of overwhelming chaos and desperation, making the human struggle feel both epic and hopeless. In contrast, low-angle shots are used to empower characters and elevate their status. When Jack stands at the very front of the ship in the "I'm the king of the world" scene, the camera looks up at him. This angle not only makes him seem larger than life, but also visually cements his feeling of invincibility and newfound freedom. The low angles during the sinking sequence, particularly in the engine room, create a sense of foreboding and immense power, showing the audience the overwhelming force of the water as it floods the ship. The use of Dutch angles, where the camera is tilted on its axis, becomes more frequent during the sinking. This subtle stylistic choice creates a feeling of unease and disorientation, mirroring the chaos and loss of control experienced by the characters. It adds a psychological layer of visual instability to the physical instability of the sinking ship. Lighting. Lighting is a powerful tool in Titanic for setting the mood and distinguishing between different social worlds on the ship. The first-class areas are bathed in warm, golden light, from the chandeliers in the dining salon to the natural light filtering through the domes. This lighting scheme highlights the opulence, comfort, and romantic ideal of the voyage, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere that reflects the pampered lives of the wealthy passengers. In stark contrast, the third-class areas are often lit with cool, practical light, or they are dimly lit by lanterns, creating a more realistic and less polished feel. This lighting choice underscores the grittier reality of their lives and visually separates their world from the luxury above. As the film progresses and the disaster unfolds, the lighting becomes increasingly harsh and cold. The moonlight on the iceberg and the dark, icy waters of the Atlantic create a chilling atmosphere of dread. Inside the ship, the lights flickering and eventually going out plunge the characters and the audience into a state of panic and fear. The final scenes are lit only by the frigid moonlight and the occasional flare, emphasizing the cold, desperate final moments of the tragedy. Framing. Framing is used to define relationships and create visual metaphors. Open framing is often used in scenes between Jack and Rose, particularly on the open deck. The camera frames them against the vastness of the ocean or the night sky, visually symbolizing the sense of boundless freedom they find in each other and their escape from the confines of their respective social classes. Conversely, closed framing is used to emphasize confinement and social pressure. Rose is frequently framed within doorways, mirrors, and tight spaces in her first-class cabin, highlighting her feeling of being trapped by her life. The framing of Jack being handcuffed to a pipe in a flooding room is an ultimate example of closed framing, visually representing his complete lack of freedom and impending doom. In the famous flying scene at the bow of the ship, the framing is a masterful blend of open and closed elements. The wide shot shows them framed against the open ocean and sky, but the close-up of their clasped hands and their faces in profile creates a tight, intimate frame that contains their emotional connection within the grand setting. This careful use of framing ensures that the love story is always at the center of the epic visual spectacle. The cinematography in Titanic is a vital narrative force, shaping the film's emotional landscape and enhancing its thematic depth through deliberate choices in camera angles, lighting, and framing. Russell Carpenter's work behind the lens is not merely decorative. It is expressive, immersive, and deeply attuned to the shifting tone and mood of the story. Camera angles are used with precision to reflect character dynamics and emotional states. In early scenes, high-angle shots often depict Rose from above, subtly reinforcing her sense of entrapment and lack of agency within her social world. These angles diminish her presence, placing her within the ornate but confining architecture of the ship. As her relationship with Jack develops, the camera begins to meet her at eye level or even from below, signaling her growing confidence and emotional liberation. Jack, by contrast, is frequently shot with wide, open compositions that emphasize his freedom and vitality. When the two characters are together, the camera often moves fluidly around them, capturing their connection in motion rather than static poses. This kinetic approach mirrors the energy of their bond and the urgency of their defiance. Lighting plays a central role in establishing mood and atmosphere. The upper decks of the Titanic are bathed in warm, golden light, evoking opulence and tradition. This lighting is soft and diffused, creating a sense of elegance but also artificiality. In contrast, the lower decks and outdoor scenes are lit with cooler, more natural tones. The steerage party, for example, is illuminated with flickering lamplight and shadows, creating a vibrant, earthy ambience that feels alive and authentic. During the sinking, the lighting shifts dramatically. Emergency flares, flickering bulbs, and the cold blue of moonlight and icy water dominate the palette, casting harsh contrasts and deep shadows that heighten the tension and sense of chaos. The interplay of light and darkness becomes a visual metaphor for the collapse of order and the intrusion of mortality. Framing is used to isolate, connect, and elevate moments of emotional significance. One of the most iconic examples is the "I'm flying" scene at the bow of the ship. The framing places Jack and Rose against the vast expanse of the ocean and sky, their figures silhouetted by the setting sun. This composition conveys both intimacy and grandeur, capturing the feeling of transcendence that defines their romance. Another striking use of framing occurs during the drawing scene. The camera lingers on Rose's face and Jack's hands, alternating between close-ups and medium shots that emphasize vulnerability, trust, and artistic connection. The framing is tight but never claustrophobic, allowing the viewer to feel the intensity of the moment without intrusion. During the sinking sequence, the cinematography becomes increasingly fragmented and urgent. Dutch angles, handheld shots, and rapid cuts convey disorientation and panic. The camera often follows characters through narrow corridors and rising water, placing the audience in the midst of the chaos. These choices create a visceral experience, where the physical danger is matched by emotional stakes. The framing becomes tighter, the lighting more erratic, and the angles more extreme, all contributing to a mood of escalating dread. There are moments of quiet visual poetry as well. The final montage, where the camera glides through the restored Titanic and its passengers, culminating in Jack and Rose's reunion at the grand staircase, is composed with reverence and warmth. The lighting is ethereal, the framing symmetrical, and the movement slow and deliberate. This sequence evokes memory, longing, and the idea of emotional closure. It is not just a visual flourish, it is a culmination of the film's emotional journey. Throughout Titanic, the cinematography does not merely support the story, it tells it. Every angle, every shadow, every composition is chosen to reflect the characters' inner lives and the broader themes of love, loss, and transformation. The visual language is rich, layered, and emotionally precise, creating a cinematic experience that resonates long after the final frame. From the first frames, the camera announces whether a moment will feel intimate or monumental. In Titanic, the lens is an active participant in the drama, choosing distance and angle to tell us who holds power, who is exposed, and where the emotion lives. Early sequences use steady, deliberate camera moves that allow rooms and rituals to breathe. The framing is generous, letting costume, set decoration, and human movement register in a single composed image. When the story wants closeness, it tightens, pulling the viewer into faces and small gestures. When it needs awe, it opens, giving the sea and the ship space to occupy the frame and to make the characters appear very small by comparison. Angles are a grammar of authority and vulnerability. Important figures are often shot from slightly lower angles that lend them monumentality, while Jack is most frequently captured at eye level, which keeps him equal to the world he invades and sympathetic to the viewer. High angles and overheads recur in the sinking sequence to make the decks look like chessboards and the people like pieces, to emphasize contingency and scale. Conversely, many of the romance beats use shallow, eye-level compositions that privilege shared space and mutual gaze, so intimacy reads as a visual contract rather than mere dialogue. The cinematography moves the camera to a height or tilt that reports social relationships as clearly as any line of exposition. Framing is used to encode class, desire, and confinement. First-class interiors favor symmetry and layered depth, often with foreground elements such as balustrades or chandeliers that create a sense of enclosure and ritual. Steerage is framed with off-center compositions and crowded planes that push faces toward the edges, suggesting improvisation and communal life. Repeated motifs appear as framing devices: doorways that separate worlds, railings that act as fragile boundaries, and the grand staircase as a centered, almost theatrical frame where poses of civility are performed. At critical moments, the camera frames lovers through these barriers, so that when those barriers break, the frame itself seems to yield, visually marking a moral break as much as a plot event. Lighting performs a narrative arc. The film's first half bathes interiors in warm, golden tones, candle and lamplight softening faces, and lending a kind of intimacy that feels private and luxurious. Those warm tones allow the courtship to bloom, skin and fabric glow, and the camera savors texture. After the icebergs strike, the palette shifts toward cold desaturation, a bluish and greenish wash that drains the opulence from the ship. Practical lights become scarce and harsh, throwing stark highlights and deep shadows across wet faces and tilting corridors. Small, practical sources such as pocket flashlights and lanterns become islands of light in an ocean of falling night, and the cinematography uses their limited reach to carve human shapes from the dark. That transition is gradual in the images, which makes the emotional cooling feel organic rather than abrupt. Movement and lens choices answer the story's needs. At moments of courtship and exploration, the camera glides with long dollies and cranes, surveying space with an almost leisurely confidence. These moves teach the viewer the topology of the ship and set up later disorientation. When panic arrives, the camera's movement tightens and quickens. Edits shorten, tracking becomes more insistent, and handheld or more dynamic framing creeps in to suggest instability. Lenses are chosen to either celebrate space with wide vistas or compress planes to emphasize claustrophobia. The alternation between wide, atmospheric images and intimate close-ups gives the film its push and pull between spectacle and personal consequence. There are images that lodge in the mind because composition, light, and movement all converge. The prow sequence where the lovers stand against the sky pairs a sweeping crane move with a low horizon and an open frame that reads as freedom incarnate. The grand staircase scenes use symmetric framing, reflective surfaces, and warm highlights to make ritual and status visible. The iceberg impact is rendered in a series of tight, tactile shots of ice and metal that eschew melodrama for physical detail. The camera looks closely enough that the ship's wound feels mechanical and inevitable. During the sinking, shots of water pouring under doors, of stairwells as tilted planes of wood and light, and of the stern rising into the fog create images that are at once horrific and poetic. Cinematography and atmosphere are inseparable here. Beauty and dread are yoked by the same visual sensibility. What looked sublime in daylight becomes tragic in the same frame at night. The camera makes the sea both a mirror and an eraser, reflecting faces and then consuming the reflection. Tension is built through composition that withholds escape routes, through light that isolates characters into small, visible islands, and through angles that repeatedly expose the vulnerability of bodies against an indifferent architecture. Even the quieter, non-catastrophic moments are charged. A close-up held a beat longer reveals a repressed decision, a change in breathing, a promise about to be broken. Finally, the cinematography constantly negotiates scale so that spectacle never smothers the human story. Wide shots establish stakes and set pieces, but the camera repeatedly returns to hands, eyes, and compressed frames where individual choices are legible. That oscillation keeps the film from drifting into pure visual awe and insists that the tragedy be felt in the skin. The result is a visual language that moves between beauty and violence, between openness and suffocation, always tethered to the emotional temperature of the scene. The editing of Titanic, much like its overall structure, is a careful and deliberate process that dictates the film's flow. It is a key element in maintaining engagement and controlling the emotional and narrative rhythm, transitioning from a leisurely paced romance to a relentlessly tense disaster film. The rhythm of romance. The first half of the film moves at a gentle, almost luxurious pace. The editing here is fluid and unhurried, reflecting the leisurely nature of the transatlantic voyage. The transitions between scenes are often smooth, allowing the audience to savor the details of the ship and the blossoming romance between Jack and Rose. Sequences like the sketching scene or the dinner party are edited to allow for dialogue and character moments to breathe. There are no abrupt cuts. Instead, the film lingers on reactions and glances, building a sense of intimacy and connection. This steady rhythm is essential. It gives the audience time to become deeply invested in the characters and their relationship before the tragedy strikes. The editing ensures that the romance feels earned, not rushed, which makes the impending disaster all the more impactful. The flow of the film in this section is like a calm sea, beautiful and serene, setting a deceptive mood of tranquility. The acceleration of the disaster. The film's rhythm undergoes a radical shift as the Titanic strikes the iceberg. The editing becomes faster and more frenetic, mirroring the growing panic and chaos on board. The serene, long takes of the first half are replaced with quick cuts and a heightened sense of urgency. The cross-cutting between different storylines, Rose and Jack fighting for survival, Cal's frantic efforts, the crew's attempts to manage the situation, and the general panic among the passengers, builds an incredible amount of tension. The editor, Conrad Buff, meticulously crafts this sequence to make the viewer feel the pressure and terror. The scenes of the rising water, the tilting decks, and the collapsing ship are intercut with shots of the characters' desperate faces, creating a visceral and relentless experience. The rhythm is no longer serene. It is a rapid, pounding beat that pulls the audience into the heart of the disaster. Seamless transitions and narrative impact. One of the most notable aspects of the film's flow is how seamlessly it transitions between time periods and moods. The use of the Heart of the Ocean necklace as a central object allows for a smooth, dreamlike transition from the present-day narrative back to 1912. The camera follows the necklace as it settles on the seabed, and then we are transported to the grand staircase, visually and narratively linking the past and the present. The editing also effectively uses montage to convey the passage of time and emotion. The sequence showing Jack and Rose's romance montage, set to the song, My Heart Will Go On, effectively summarizes their time together in a condensed yet emotionally powerful way. This gives the audience a concentrated dose of their love story, ensuring its emotional weight is felt fully during the disaster. The flow of the film, therefore, is not a simple linear progression but a carefully constructed ebb and flow of pace, designed to maximize emotional and narrative impact, making the viewer feel the grandeur and the subsequent terror of the voyage. The film's flow is shaped like a slow tide that builds and then breaks. It begins with a deliberate, almost patient tempo that allows the world of the ship to be taught to the audience. Long takes, extended master shots and fluid camera moves let character beats breathe. These early editorial choices create breathing room for intimacy and ritual, so the audience learns how people move, speak, and live aboard the vessel before stakes abruptly change. Because time is given to small gestures, the film creates a reservoir of feeling that the later crisis can draw from. Transitions are often seamless because the editors privilege spatial and emotional continuity. Match dissolves, careful eye-line matches, and motivated camera moves carry the viewer smoothly from one deck to another and from present day to past. The framing device with the older Rose is threaded in with short returns that act as emotional punctuation marks rather than interruptions. When the scene changes, it usually changes with a visual or thematic link, so that the cut looks and feels like a logical step rather than a jump. This is editing as choreography. Cuts happen where bodies and props already suggest a next move. The first two acts are paced to luxuriate in texture and relationship. Sequences of dining, promenading, and private conversation play out at a steady, often unhurried rhythm. The effect is that courtship can mature, class dynamics can be established, and tiny, quiet decisions gain weight. The edit allows pauses to hold, looks to register, and music to swell without rushing the audience. That measured pace makes the film feel ceremonious and ritualized, which suits the social codes that are central to the story. The iceberg collision, and what follows reconfigure the edit into a machine that measures time and consequence. After the strike, the film moves into sharply organized cross-cutting. The edit alternates between the bridge, the engine room, the wireless room, lifeboat stations and intimate cabins to show cause and effect. Shot durations shorten in a controlled way. Instead of a chaotic blur, the acceleration feels engineered. The rhythm becomes a pendulum of suspense, a long-held reaction followed by a rapid sequence that advances the catastrophe one procedural beat at a time. There are moments where the editing artfully slows within the rush to preserve humanity. During the sinking, amid the intercutting and alert-driven montage, the film still carves out pockets of slow reckoning. Close-ups on faces, hands, the exchange of a word, a held embrace, a particular gesture are given time in the edit so emotion does not evaporate behind spectacle. Those slower beats act as counterweights, allowing the audience to register grief and courage even as the ship's geometry collapses. Pacing occasionally risks feeling expansive to the point of indulgence. The film's long setup requires patience, and some viewers may sense the narrative lingering on world-building passages longer than strictly necessary. Conversely, the film can feel compressed when the crisis demands that many arcs be resolved in a tight span. The final hour attempts to serve 1,000 threads and occasionally trims connective tissue to maintain momentum. Those pacing choices are editorial statements about what to linger on and what to accelerate, and they shape which emotions are permitted to arrive fully formed and which must be suggested. Rhythm works at multiple scales. Micro-edits create the pulse of a scene by timing reactions and matching breath. Macro-edits construct the film's waves by alternating calm and catastrophe across acts. The interplay of long takes and quick cuts creates a dialectic between intimacy and spectacle. When the film chooses a long take, the viewer is asked to sit inside a feeling. When it cuts rapidly, the viewer is asked to witness consequence. That alternation is what makes the movie feel both epic and human, because the edit constantly reorients attention between the wide and the particular. Sound editing and score inform the pace as much as image cuts. Diegetic sounds such as bells, whistles, telegraph clicks, and creaking metal are often the cues that trigger an edit or a camera move. Music swells shape expectation, and then pulls back so that the edit can present raw sound when it wants to be visceral. Silence is used as an edit decision in itself. A cut into near quiet before a loud event intensifies the shock by contrast. The rhythm of audio and visual cutting together controls where emotion crescendos and where it is held in check. Finally, the editing's primary achievement is maintaining comprehension across vast scale. The film juggles romance, class drama, technical procedure, and disaster without losing the viewer. Anchor shots and repeated visual motifs work like editorial landmarks. The audience always knows roughly where they are on the ship and what the immediate stakes are. That clarity allows emotional investment to deepen because the edit does not force the viewer to puzzle out geography. It simply asks the viewer to feel, and then times its cuts so those feelings arrive with force and clarity. The flow of Titanic is a carefully orchestrated progression that mirrors the emotional and thematic arc of the story. The editing, led by Conrad Buff, James Cameron, and Richard A. Harris, is designed not just to move the narrative forward, but to shape the viewer's emotional experience with precision and grace. The rhythm of the film is deliberate, shifting in tone and tempo to reflect the evolving stakes and moods of the characters and their world. The first half of the film unfolds with a measured, almost languid pace. This is not a flaw, but a conscious choice. The editing allows scenes to breathe, giving space for character development and emotional resonance. Transitions between scenes are smooth and often lyrical, with dissolves and slow fades that evoke the passage of time and the unfolding of memory. The use of cross-cutting between the present-day expedition and the 1912 narrative creates a reflective tone, anchoring the romance in a framework of remembrance. These transitions are not jarring. They are woven into the fabric of the story, reinforcing the idea that the past is being revisited, not relived. As Jack and Rose's relationship begins to blossom, the editing subtly accelerates. Scenes become more dynamic, with quicker cuts and more fluid camera movement. The rhythm reflects the energy and urgency of their connection. The dance sequence in Steerage, for example, is edited with a lively tempo that captures the joy and spontaneity of the moment. Yet even in these more active sequences, the editors maintain clarity and emotional focus. The viewer is never lost in the motion. The cuts are purposeful, guiding attention and reinforcing mood. The turning point of the film, the iceberg collision, marks a dramatic shift in pacing and rhythm. The editing becomes tighter, more fragmented, and increasingly urgent. The transition from romance to disaster is handled with escalating tension. The initial impact is shown with restraint, but as the ship begins to sink, the tempo quickens. Cross-cutting is used to heighten suspense, moving between different characters and locations to convey the scale of the crisis. The editors balance chaos with coherence, ensuring that the viewer remains emotionally anchored even as the physical world collapses. During the sinking sequence, the rhythm is relentless but never monotonous. The editing alternates between moments of panic and moments of intimacy, allowing for emotional peaks and valleys. Scenes of mechanical failure and flooding are juxtaposed with quiet exchanges between Jack and Rose, creating a contrast that deepens the emotional impact. The use of slow motion in select moments, such as the ship's final plunge, adds a sense of tragic grandeur, emphasizing the weight of the moment rather than rushing through it. In the final act, the pacing slows once more, returning to a reflective tone. The editing becomes more contemplative, with longer takes and gentle transitions. The rhythm mirrors Rose's emotional journey, moving from trauma to remembrance. The closing montage, which revisits the ship in its restored glory, is edited with a sense of reverence and closure. The tempo is slow, the cuts deliberate, and the mood elegiac. Throughout the film, the editors maintain a delicate balance between narrative propulsion and emotional depth. They understand when to linger and when to move, when to build tension and when to release it. The rhythm of Titanic is not uniform. It is responsive, evolving in tandem with the story's emotional currents. This dynamic flow ensures that the viewer remains engaged, not just intellectually but viscerally, experiencing the film as a journey rather than a sequence of events. The editing is invisible in its craftsmanship, yet unmistakable in its impact. It shapes the film's tone, sustains its mood, and amplifies its emotional resonance with unwavering precision. The music in Titanic, composed by James Horner, is an essential narrative element that deepens the film's emotional resonance and enhances its atmospheric texture. Horner's score is not merely an accompaniment to the visuals. It is a voice within the story, articulating feelings that dialogue cannot and guiding the audience through the shifting emotional terrain with subtlety and grace. One of the most striking aspects of the score is its thematic cohesion. Horner employs recurring motifs that evolve alongside the characters and their journey. The central love theme, which later became the foundation for the song, My Heart Will Go On, is introduced early in the film in instrumental form. It appears in various guises, sometimes as a gentle piano melody, other times as a sweeping orchestral passage, each variation tailored to the emotional context of the scene. This motif becomes a musical representation of Jack and Rose's connection, echoing their intimacy, longing, and eventual loss. Its recurrence creates a sense of continuity and emotional layering, allowing the audience to feel the weight of their bond even in moments of silence or separation. Horner's use of Celtic instrumentation, including Uilleann pipes and tin whistles, adds a distinctive tonal quality to the score. These elements evoke a sense of timelessness and melancholy, aligning with the film's themes of memory and tragedy. The Celtic influence also serves to bridge the historical setting with the emotional universality of the story, grounding the romance in a soundscape that feels both ancient and immediate. Silence is used with equal precision. Horner understands that music is most powerful when it knows when to recede. In scenes of intense drama or emotional gravity, the absence of music allows the natural sounds, the creaking of the ship, the rush of water, the cries of passengers, to dominate the auditory field. This restraint heightens realism and tension. One notable example is the moment when the Titanic begins its final descent. The score fades, leaving only the ambient chaos. When the music returns, it does so with solemnity, reinforcing the magnitude of the loss. The score also plays a crucial role in pacing and mood modulation. During the early scenes, the music is light and lyrical, reflecting the optimism and grandeur of the voyage. As Jack and Rose's relationship develops, the score becomes more intimate, with delicate strings and piano underscoring their private moments. When disaster strikes, the music shifts dramatically. Horner introduces dissonant harmonies, urgent rhythms, and swelling crescendos that mirror the escalating danger. Yet even in these moments, the score never overwhelms the narrative. It supports the emotional beats without dictating them, allowing the performances and visuals to lead. One of the most emotionally potent uses of music occurs during the montage of passengers facing their fate. Horner's composition here is mournful and restrained, with a slow, descending melody that evokes sorrow without sentimentality. The music does not manipulate, it reflects. It allows the viewer to sit with the tragedy, to feel its weight without being pushed toward a specific reaction. The integration of "My Heart Will Go On" into the score is handled with care. Rather than dominating the film, the song's melody is woven throughout in instrumental form, surfacing at key moments to reinforce emotional continuity. Its full vocal rendition is reserved for the end credits, serving as a coda rather than a climax. This choice preserves the integrity of the narrative while offering a final emotional release. Throughout Titanic, Horner's score is a masterclass in emotional storytelling. It listens to the film as much as it speaks to it, responding to its rhythms, moods, and silences with sensitivity and intelligence. The music does not stand apart from the story. It is embedded within it, shaping its emotional contours and amplifying its thematic depth with every note. The score of Titanic, composed by James Horner, is a powerful and integral part of the film's storytelling, expertly enhancing its atmosphere and emotional beats. The music is not merely an accompaniment, it is a character in itself, guiding the audience through the film's shifts in mood and tone. The score blends seamlessly with the narrative, never overpowering the visuals, but instead elevating them to an emotional crescendo. Thematic motifs. The score is built around a few core musical motifs that are masterfully woven throughout the film. The most prominent is the love theme, a soaring, romantic melody that is first heard in its gentle, flute-driven form. This theme, which eventually becomes the iconic song, "My Heart Will Go On," is a leitmotif for the relationship between Jack and Rose. It first appears as a hopeful, innocent melody as they begin to fall for each other. As their love deepens, the theme swells with a full orchestra, transforming into a grand, epic composition that perfectly captures the feeling of their boundless romance. The music is at its most triumphant when they are at the bow of the ship, symbolizing their freedom and joy. The use of this single theme in various arrangements, from a simple penny whistle to a full choir, allows the music to mirror the evolution of their love. Another crucial motif is the tragedy theme, which is often somber and haunting. This motif is introduced early on in the film, subtly foreshadowing the impending disaster. It is typically carried by a melancholy chorus or a sad, repetitive string arrangement. As the ship begins to sink, this theme becomes more pronounced and urgent, adding to the atmosphere of dread and sorrow. The music expertly builds tension and despair, underscoring the horrific nature of the events unfolding. The use of silence and diegetic sound. Horner's score is also effective in its use of silence. In some of the film's most powerful moments, the music completely fades away, leaving only the diegetic sounds of the film. The silence in the moments after the iceberg is hit is particularly striking. The abrupt stop of the music and the sound of the ship scraping against the ice create a chilling and unsettling atmosphere. This deliberate use of silence forces the audience to confront the reality of the situation, making the horror more immediate and personal. Later, as the ship breaks apart, the score is often minimal, allowing the terrifying sound effects of groaning metal and rushing water to take center stage. This choice prevents the music from feeling manipulative, and instead allows the natural sounds of the disaster to create a visceral sense of fear. Standout compositions. Beyond the recurring motifs, several standout compositions define key moments. The track Rose's Theme is particularly notable for its delicate use of the Celtic penny whistle and female vocals, which evoke a sense of longing and a timeless quality. This sound is immediately recognizable and becomes synonymous with Rose's character and her emotional journey. The full-throated, emotional crescendo of the orchestra during the final scenes of the sinking is a masterwork of cinematic scoring. The music swells as the ship goes down, creating a soundscape of both terror and profound sadness. The music is relentless in these moments, pulling the audience through the chaos and cementing the emotional weight of the tragedy. It doesn't just score the visuals, it embodies the despair, heroism, and sorrow of the final moments. From the very first cue, James Horner treats the film as a memory told in music, a mixture of longing and inevitability that sits behind the camera like a second narrator. The score gives the romance a clear melodic identity, a yearning theme that appears in many guises, and it counters that lyricism with a more mechanical, processional material that hints at the ship as machine and at human hubris. The pop ballad that became synonymous with the film appears over the credits, but its roots are woven through the orchestral score, so the tune feels inevitable rather than an afterthought. A sustained, wordless vocal line recurs often, rising like a human breath inside the orchestral wash and turning certain moments into small, aching clarities. Horner writes in motifs and lets them do narrative work. There is a love motif that often ascends in simple intervals and is voiced by a plaintive, whistle-like solo or by exposed strings, creating an immediacy that reads as personal and intimate. Opposite this sits a low, repeated pattern in the lower strings and brass that sounds like gears and rivets, a sonic shorthand for structure and engineering. Folk-inflected textures surface in the third-class sequences, where fiddles, rhythmic bowing and stomping give life and warmth, while chamber textures and restrained string writing mark first-class ritual. The collision of these musical worlds mirrors the collision of social worlds on board. Instrumentation and orchestration are deployed as storytelling instruments. Light, breathy voices and soloed wind instruments carry private feeling. Lush string sections supply sweep, and sweep are reserved for moments when the camera opens wide. Small, diegetic ensembles establish realism in upper-deck scenes and also function as harbingers when those same ensembles are heard against the background of disaster. Horner's choice to include a distinctive solo voice and whistle-like lines gives certain cues the quality of personal memory, while the fuller orchestral textures make the ship's grand gestures feel monumental. Silence and the careful withholding of music are as important as any theme. At the moment of impact and in the immediate aftermath, the score pulls back, allowing the creak of metal, the snap of canvas, and the staccato morse of the wireless to register with surgical clarity. That retreat makes each re-entry of the theme more devastating because the music returns into a landscape already charged by real, physical sound. The film also uses diegetic music as a moral counterpoint, most painfully when the ship's band continues to play as the water rises. That diegetic music is not ornamental in those frames, it is a moral chord, a human insistence that becomes unbearably intimate when set against drowning. There are several visually and orally iconic alignments where cinematography and score meet perfectly. The prow sequence where the main love theme unfurls over open sky is one of those moments where melody, camera movement and silence create a single sensation of freedom. The steerage dance gives music a body, full of rhythm and presence, and it functions as a social inversion where sound physically dissolves class boundaries. The iceberg strike and the wireless room scenes use absence and mechanical sound to make danger palpable before the orchestra translates it into emotional consequence. In the ship's final moments, Horner layers descending string figures, choral swells and fractured orchestral hits in a way that translates architecture breaking into human terms. Throughout the film, the score negotiates scale so that the music supports but rarely upstages the drama. Orchestration, dynamics and placement in the mix are calibrated so that sometimes a single exposed instrument carries more weight than the full orchestra, and other times the orchestra swells to supply the cinematic sweep. The occasional use of a contemporary vocal ballad at the end proved controversial, yet even that choice functions like a final exhalation that carries the film from period tableau into living memory. The score's recurring motifs, its use of folk versus chamber colors, its strategic silences, and its pairing with diegetic sound all give the film a musical architecture that amplifies longing, undersays collapse, and keeps the audience inside both the grandeur and the human scale of the story. Titanic explores a constellation of deeper themes that extend far beyond its central romance, weaving together ideas of class division, personal liberation, memory, mortality, and the fragility of human ambition. These themes are not imposed upon the narrative, but emerge organically from the characters' experiences and the historical context in which they unfold. The film's emotional tone and visual grandeur serve to amplify these ideas, allowing them to resonate without ever feeling contrived or didactic. Class disparity is one of the most prominent thematic threads. The Titanic itself is a floating microcosm of early 20th century society, meticulously divided into rigid social strata. The physical layout of the ship reinforces this hierarchy, with opulent salons and private suites for the wealthy, and cramped, communal quarters for steerage passengers. The film uses this structure to explore how class shapes opportunity, freedom, and even survival. Jack and Rose's relationship becomes a quiet rebellion against these divisions. Their love is not just romantic, it is transgressive, challenging the boundaries imposed by wealth and status. The sinking of the ship exposes the brutal consequences of these divisions, as access to lifeboats and escape routes is determined not by need but by privilege. The film does not preach this message. It shows it, through the fates of its characters and the choices they are forced to make. Personal liberation is another central theme, embodied most vividly in Rose's arc. At the beginning of the film, she is a young woman suffocating under the expectations of her family and fiancé. Her life is scripted, her choices predetermined. Jack represents an alternative, a life defined by passion, creativity, and autonomy. Through their relationship, Rose begins to reclaim her agency, making choices that reflect her desires rather than her obligations. This transformation is not sudden but gradual, marked by small acts of defiance and self-expression. The film communicates this theme with emotional clarity, allowing the audience to witness Rose's awakening not through exposition but through behavior, gesture, and gaze. Memory and its preservation form the emotional framework of the narrative. The story is told through the lens of an older Rose, whose recollections give shape to the events of the past. This structure invites reflection on how memory functions, not as a perfect record, but as a vessel for emotion, meaning, and identity. The Titanic becomes more than a historical tragedy. It becomes a symbol of a moment that defined a life. The film's tone, often elegiac and contemplative, reinforces this theme. The use of flashbacks, visual motifs, and recurring musical cues creates a sense of temporal layering, where past and present coexist. The message is clear without being overstated. What we remember shapes who we are, and some memories are too powerful to fade. Mortality and the impermanence of human achievement are explored through the fate of the ship itself. The Titanic was a marvel of engineering, a symbol of progress and invincibility. Its sinking is a stark reminder of nature's indifference and the limits of human control. The film does not dwell on this theme with cynicism, but with a sense of tragic awe. The grandeur of the ship, the pride of its builders, and the optimism of its passengers are all rendered with reverence, making its destruction all the more poignant. This theme is communicated visually and emotionally, through the contrast between the ship's initial splendor and its final descent into darkness. Love, as a transformative force, is the emotional core of the film. Jack and Rose's relationship is not portrayed as a fairy tale, but as a catalyst for growth, courage, and self-discovery. Their love is fleeting, yet its impact endures. The film suggests that some connections, however brief, can alter the course of a life. This idea is reinforced by the framing device of Rose's later years, where the memory of Jack remains vivid and formative. The theme is communicated with sincerity and restraint, allowing the audience to feel its truth rather than be told it. Titanic also touches on the idea of sacrifice and heroism in the face of disaster. Characters respond to the sinking in varied ways, some with cowardice, others with dignity. The film does not simplify these responses, but presents them with emotional complexity. The musicians who continue to play, the officers who maintain order, the parents who comfort their children. These moments reflect the human capacity for grace under pressure. The theme is not romanticized but honored, presented as a quiet testament to resilience. These themes are woven into the fabric of the film with care and emotional intelligence. They do not distract from the story but deepen it, offering layers of meaning that linger long after the final image fades. The film's tone, by turns romantic, tragic, and reflective, creates a space where these ideas can unfold naturally, inviting the audience not just to watch, but to feel and remember. Titanic is a film that explores several deeper themes and messages, which are woven into the fabric of its central romance and historical tragedy. The film effectively communicates these ideas, using the ship itself as a powerful metaphor for society. The themes feel organically tied to the characters' journeys and the real-life historical context, leaving a lasting impression on the audience. Class and social division. One of the most prominent themes is the rigid class structure of the Edwardian era. The film portrays the Titanic not just as a ship, but as a microcosm of society, with its stark divisions between the wealthy first-class passengers and the poor in steerage. The film visually and narratively emphasizes this divide, showing the opulence and privilege of the upper deck and the communal, vibrant life below. Rose's entrapment within the suffocating expectations of the aristocracy and Jack's freedom from such constraints highlight the hypocrisy and injustice of this system. The sinking of the ship then becomes a great equalizer. In the face of death, the social distinctions that once defined their lives become meaningless, forcing a re-evaluation of what truly matters. The film effectively communicates this theme by showing how the unsinkable ship's social hierarchy is just as fragile as its physical one. The power of love and sacrifice. At its heart, the film is a testament to the power of love and sacrifice. The romance between Jack and Rose is more than just a fleeting affair. It is a profound journey of mutual liberation. Jack doesn't just save Rose from drowning. He saves her from a life of emotional suffocation. In turn, Rose gives Jack a purpose and a legacy that transcends his short life. The film argues that true love is transformative, capable of inspiring immense personal growth and courageous acts. The most lasting message is the theme of sacrifice, embodied by Jack's ultimate decision to let go so Rose can survive. This act is not portrayed as a mere plot device, but as a powerful and tearful conclusion to their love story. It elevates their bond beyond a simple romance to a tragic and heroic epic. Fate versus free will. The film also subtly explores the philosophical question of fate versus free will. The Titanic itself is presented as an almost fated monument, a symbol of human hubris doomed from the start. The narrative is framed by old Rose's memories, giving the audience the sense that the events were always destined to unfold as they did. However, within this fated tragedy, the characters still have agency. Rose makes a conscious choice to abandon her predetermined life, and Jack chooses to save her and then ultimately sacrifice himself. The film suggests that while external forces, like an iceberg or social class, may set the stage, it is the choices we make and the relationships we forge that define our lives and determine our legacy. The story's lasting impression comes from this duality, the great, unstoppable force of destiny crashing against the small, heroic acts of individual choice. At its surface, Titanic is a sweeping romance and a disaster epic, but its deeper architecture is built from recurring questions about who is allowed to live fully, who pays the price for ambition, and how memory itself reshapes meaning. The film arranges those questions into motifs and moments rather than didactic statements, so themes arrive through action, staging, and the choices characters make under pressure. Class and social geometry run like a seam through almost every scene. The ship is presented as a vertical society whose decks map status and entitlement. First class is ritual, polished surfaces, and staged public appearances. Steerage is embodied life, music, warmth, and improvisation. Cameron translates that division into physical blocking, costume, and the juxtaposition of communal dances with formal dinners. When mechanisms meant to protect status fail, the moral economy of the ship is exposed. Lifeboats become a test of social priorities, locked gates literalize exclusion, and characters embody institutional positions. Some defend privilege with coercion, others confront it with sacrifice. The film makes the critique clear without turning it into an abstract sermon, yet at moments the representation flattens complexity into moral silhouettes, trading ambiguity for a crystalline sense of right and wrong so that the social critique reads as both visceral and, at times, simplified. Hubris and the fragility of human engineering are dramatized through material detail. The Titanic is not only a setting but a metaphor for industrial confidence. Close-ups of rivets, valves, and engine rooms create a tactile sense of construction, and the iceberg functions as indifferent counterforce. The collision is staged as the moment human order meets blind nature, and the subsequent unraveling converts technical failure into moral reckoning. That transformation works because the film has already taught the viewer the ship's systems. Failure, therefore, feels intelligible rather than arbitrary. Thematically, this translates into a meditation on progress and its costs, a warning about scale and certainty that the narrative makes concrete through labor scenes, the comportment of company men, and the quiet dignity of those who repair rather than boast. Love in Titanic operates as resistance and as a gesture toward autonomy. The romance between the leads is not merely sentimental ornamentation. It is a thread that complicates class boundaries and models a different set of values. Intimacy becomes a political act when Rose rejects a marriage that would trap her, and when Jack insists on dignity for himself and his companions. Those personal choices ripple outward in the narrative, redefining stakes during catastrophe. At the same time, the film courts melodrama and occasionally leans on sentimental beats in ways that can feel telegraphed. The romance's emotional urgency is undeniable and often earned by performance, but part of its power also comes from how it simplifies complexity into a single emblematic relationship, making private feelings stand in for broader social longings. Memory and testimony govern the film's narrative frame and ethical posture. By opening and closing with an older witness, the story is positioned as curated recollection rather than neutral reportage. Objects and fragments become memory anchors, a sketchbook, a necklace, a pocket watch. Those artifacts mediate between past and present and ask the audience to consider what survives a disaster and why certain stories are told over others. This reflexivity is thematically rich because it asks whether history is an accumulation of facts or an aggregation of meanings, and it complicates the viewer's relation to spectacle. The film uses memory to humanize mass loss, but it also makes the audience complicit in how narratives are packaged, raising subtle questions about ownership of stories and the ethics of retelling. Moral behavior under duress is examined without simple binary judgments. Acts of courage and cowardice coexist on the same decks, and the film pays attention to small, practical choices as moral barometers. The musicians who play to steadiness, the engineers who remain at their posts, and the passengers who barter dignity for safety are presented as particular faces of how humans respond. The film stages these choices as part of a moral geography where physical position and social expectation influence outcomes. That makes the tragedy not only a matter of fate, but of decisions that reveal character and systemic failure. Time and transience are threaded through visual and narrative motifs. Clocks, repeated journeys across the same staircases, and the contrast between the ship's rigid schedules and the sudden collapse of time underline mortality's intrusion into constructed order. Love, memory, and loss are all measured against this collapsing chronology, which gives the romance its fugitive beauty and the disaster its cruel inevitability. The film's emotional logic depends on this sense that moments can be both ordinary and epical, that a single decision can reconfigure a life's narrative. Finally, the film wrestles with the ethics of spectacle. It stages a catastrophe on an epic scale while insisting on human particulars. That tension is productive and uneasy. Spectacle draws attention and can feel exploitative, but the film insists that spectacle be humanized by detail and testimony. The framing device acknowledges the act of looking, turning viewers into witnesses rather than passive consumers. That gesture complicates the film's own grandeur and asks the audience to balance aesthetic awe with moral attention. The visual effects in Titanic represent a landmark achievement in filmmaking, blending digital and practical effects with a remarkable degree of seamlessness for the time. The effects are used to enhance immersion and to serve the story, not to distract from it. Rather than being a series of flashy, standalone set pieces, the visual effects create a believable and grand world for the characters to inhabit. Blending practical and digital effects. James Cameron's philosophy was to use every tool available, and this meant a meticulous combination of digital and physical assets. The film's most impressive visual achievements stem from this hybrid approach. For example, a nearly full-sized replica of the ship's exterior was built, along with large-scale sets of key areas like the grand staircase and the first-class dining salon. When filming, actors performed on these detailed, real-world sets. Digital effects were then used to extend these practical sets, adding the rest of the ship's hull, the ocean, and the sky. This technique ensured that the foreground, where the human drama unfolds, felt completely real, while the digital extensions provided the epic scale required for the story. This blend creates a suspension of disbelief that remains effective even today. A particularly effective example of this is the flying scene at the bow of the ship. The shot begins with Jack and Rose on a practical set piece of the bow, but as the camera pulls back, it seamlessly transitions to a highly detailed miniature of the ship sailing on a water tank, all augmented by digital water and skies. The role of digital effects. The digital effects in Titanic were groundbreaking, especially for their use of computer-generated water and digital crowds. Prior to this film, CGI water was a major challenge. The digital ocean in Titanic was revolutionary, allowing for vast, photorealistic seas that could be manipulated for the sinking sequences. Similarly, the use of digital extras was a new innovation. Motion capture was used to create convincing digital stuntmen for dangerous scenes, such as falling from great heights. While some of the digital people may appear less detailed by today's standards, their primary function was to fill the wide shots of the deck, adding to the sense of a real, populated ship without putting thousands of extras at risk. Their movements and numbers sell the immense scale of the disaster, making the chaos feel real. The impact of practical effects. The film's practical effects are a testament to Cameron's obsessive attention to detail and his preference for physical realism. The sets for the sinking sequence were built on hydraulics that could be tilted and submerged, allowing the actors to perform their terror-stricken reactions to a real, physically moving environment. This provides a raw, authentic feel that digital effects alone could not replicate. Water was released into the sets, creating real currents and effects that the actors had to contend with. The use of large-scale models, particularly of the ship's final breakup, gives the sequence a palpable sense of weight and physical destruction. The visual power of the ship splitting in two is due to the combination of a detailed model, carefully orchestrated pyrotechnics, and digital augmentation, proving that practical effects, when expertly executed, can be just as impactful as their digital counterparts. This video is a behind-the-scenes look at how James Cameron created the sinking scenes, showing the blend of massive practical sets and cutting-edge CGI. The visual effects in Titanic are seamlessly integrated into the film's world, serving not a spectacle for its own sake, but as a tool for immersion, atmosphere, and emotional impact. James Cameron's approach to effects is rooted in storytelling. Every digital enhancement and practical execution is designed to support the narrative, evoke realism, and maintain the film's tonal integrity. The result is a visual landscape that feels both grand and grounded, where technology and craftsmanship converge to recreate a historical moment with visceral immediacy. Digital effects are used sparingly but strategically. The most prominent example is the recreation of the Titanic itself, which required extensive computer-generated imagery to depict the ship in motion, its full scale, and its eventual destruction. These sequences are rendered with a level of detail and physicality that avoids the artificial gloss often associated with CGI. The lighting, texture, and movement of the digital ship are calibrated to match the practical sets, creating a visual continuity that makes the transition between real and virtual imperceptible. The digital effects are particularly effective in wide shots, where the ship sails across the ocean or breaks apart during the sinking. These moments are not just technically impressive, they are emotionally charged, capturing the enormity of the event without overwhelming the viewer. Practical effects play a dominant role in the film's execution, especially in scenes involving water, destruction, and physical interaction. Cameron constructed a near full-scale replica of the Titanic's exterior and interior sections, allowing for immersive camera work and authentic performances. The flooding sequences were achieved using massive water tanks and hydraulic systems, creating real pressure, movement, and chaos. These practical elements lend a tactile realism to the film, grounding the disaster in physical space. When characters struggle through rising water, cling to railings, or fall into the ocean, the weight and resistance of their environment are palpable. This realism enhances the tension and emotional stakes, making the audience feel the danger rather than simply observe it. The interplay between practical and digital effects is most evident during the sinking sequence. As the ship tilts and breaks apart, digital models are used to depict large-scale destruction, while practical sets provide close-up environments for the actors. The editing and cinematography ensure that these elements are woven together seamlessly. The camera moves fluidly between macro and micro perspectives, from sweeping shots of the ship's descent to intimate moments of struggle and farewell. This integration maintains the film's emotional focus, preventing the effects from becoming a distraction. Atmosphere is another area where visual effects contribute meaningfully. The use of digital matte paintings and compositing creates expansive skies, ocean vistas, and period-accurate backgrounds that enrich the setting without drawing attention to themselves. These enhancements are subtle, designed to support the mood rather than dominate the frame. The lighting and color grading are consistent across practical and digital elements, preserving the film's visual coherence. One of the most striking examples of visual effects enhancing emotion is the final plunge of the Titanic. The combination of digital destruction, practical water effects, and performance creates a sequence that is both terrifying and tragic. The effects do not overshadow the human drama, they amplify it. The viewer is not marveling at the technology, but experiencing the collapse of a world. Even in quieter moments, visual effects are used with restraint and purpose. The underwater scenes in the present-day narrative, showing the wreckage of the Titanic, blend miniature models, CGI, and real footage to evoke a sense of haunting beauty. These sequences set the tone for the film's meditation on memory and loss, using visual effects to create atmosphere rather than action. Throughout Titanic, the effects are in service of story, character, and emotion. They are executed with a commitment to realism and integration, ensuring that the viewer remains immersed in the world rather than pulled out by technical artifice. The balance between practical and digital techniques reflects a philosophy of filmmaking where technology enhances rather than replaces human experience. The result is a visual tapestry that supports the film's themes of grandeur, fragility, and enduring memory. In Titanic, the visual effects are woven into the narrative in a way that privileges believability over spectacle. Cameron's approach is to make the ship and its environment tangible before introducing digital augmentation. Full-scale sets, practical water tanks, and partial ship reconstructions create a physical reality that actors can interact with, so the digital components are anchored in material truth. The audience experiences the decks, staircases, cabins, and open bow not as renderings but as spaces inhabited, which allows CGI extensions, such as the towering funnels, distant decks, or flooding lower levels, to feel like natural continuations of the physical set rather than overlays. Practical effects dominate the tactile experience of disaster. Water flows, collapsing furniture, tilting decks, and actors struggling against currents are mostly achieved through physical mechanisms. The rocking set pieces, coupled with precise choreography, allow reactions to appear grounded. The digital effects enhance these moments rather than replace them, extending the ship's length or creating realistic surges where practical limits would otherwise constrain movement. The result is a seamless marriage. Practical detail provides weight and texture, while digital elements supply scale and environmental continuity. The iceberg collision is an example of this integration. The camera often cuts between the real set reacting with actors, small-scale models, and digital renderings of ice and hull interaction. The effect is convincing because each medium obeys consistent physics and lighting logic. The iceberg itself is digital, but its presence is validated by the splintering decks, water displacement, and human responses captured in camera. The audience perceives it as part of a coherent physical environment, which amplifies both tension and immersion. Flooding sequences demonstrate a careful balance of digital and practical effects. Rising water interacts with actors and sets in real time, while extended corridors or massive swells that exceed tank limits are filled in digitally. Reflections, surface tension, and transparency are matched to the practical water, preventing any sense of artifice. The seamless compositing ensures that the peril feels immediate and tangible. Each struggle against currents registers as authentic because the camera captures real physical resistance. Lighting is crucial to blending effects. Digital additions are matched to practical illumination on set. Shadows, highlights, and color temperature are calibrated so that the augmented elements occupy the same visual space. Night sequences, emergency lamps, and lanterns interact convincingly with water, walls, and actors, allowing digital and practical components to share the same light sources. Even during chaotic sequences where multiple effects converge, the eye rarely detects a divide, because lighting continuity reinforces spatial logic. The camera often moves with actors in dynamic ways, which adds complexity to integrating visual effects. Cranes, dollies, and handheld movements capture both performance and environment in fluid motion, providing reference points for digital extensions. This strategy ensures that audience attention remains on human stakes, while the surrounding ship digitally expands or collapses around them. Depth cues, perspective, and foreground-background relationships are carefully maintained, so immersion is preserved even during wide shots of the ship breaking apart. Smoke, fire, and atmospheric effects are another layer where practical and digital techniques intersect. Steam from boilers, mist over water, and smoke from funnels are captured with physical sources and enhanced digitally for scale or consistency. The result is an environment that reads as lived in and natural. When water bursts through doors or steam floods stairwells, the combination of real particles and digital augmentation creates both spectacle and tactile immediacy. Finally, the sequence of the ship's final moments exemplifies the balance between physical and digital execution. Decks tilt dramatically, water rises, and characters move under constraints that are both real and enhanced. Wide shots of the stern lifting, the hull fracturing, and lifeboats being deployed are primarily digital constructions informed by precise models and reference footage. Close-ups retain practical grounding, showing actors struggling in real water, gripping rails, and reacting to forces that exist on the set. That alternation keeps the audience emotionally invested while allowing the scale of the disaster to be convincingly rendered. Throughout Titanic, the visual effects are designed not as showpieces but as tools of immersion. Every digital element is subordinated to the physical reality of sets, props, and actor movement. Practical effects provide tangibility, digital effects provide scale, and their integration is governed by consistent physics, lighting, and perspective. The audience experiences the Titanic as a fully realized world, where danger, architecture, and human vulnerability coexist convincingly, heightening both narrative stakes and emotional impact.